Welcome everybody to the our first attempt at a completely virtual online Meet the Candidates night. This is being hosted by the Barre Town Democratic Committee, who is helpful enough to be able to put together all the Zoom and manage all of the technical things and all of that. This is a nonpartisan event. They're simply providing the platform on which we can all discuss things. If you don't know me, I'm Joshua Smith. I'm a town moderator here in Barre, and I will go over our format and things like that after we first hear from the illustrious former Senator Stephen Brewer. Well,
thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thanks to the Barre Democratic Town Committee. There's a lot of work that goes into these things to inform the voters. 11 days from now, the town will go to the polls to elect a very important office for the Board of Selectmen, the Planning Board, and any number of offices for the town. 44 years ago, which is staggering to think of, in April of 1977, I ran for the Board of Selectmen, and I haven't looked back since. I want to congratulate every person who is offering their time to serve in municipal government. These are very difficult times, but they're always difficult times. There's very often unexpected circumstances when you get sworn in to a board. For example, our town hall stood from 1839 until 1981 when it was destroyed by fire, thinking that as a selectman, that consumed the next 2 years of my career as a selectman, rebuilding the town hall. You never know what's going to happen. Again, in 1980, the voters passed what we call Proposition 2.5, which really put a stranglehold on local finances. And you had to go back to the board, to the finance committee, and cut budgets radically to conform to Proposition 2.5. So there are uncertain times and uncertain circumstances. But the only way citizen democracy works is if good, honest people that have the interests of the community, both in the long term and in the short term, to put themselves out there and serve. So let me say this, all of you who are candidates tonight, I thank you, the town thanks you for putting up yourselves forward to do this. So I look forward to the moderator, who's doing a great job for this community, will be having a series of thoughtful questions that I hope that you can help to illuminate the citizens. This is going to be recorded, so those people that perhaps may not be watching it right now will have the opportunity to hear from the candidates. And so let the discussions begin. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. So the format's pretty simple. I have a whole bunch of questions that were submitted in advance by various people, and a few that I wrote myself. And I am going to ask these questions of the various candidates and give each of them 2 minutes to respond. I don't think we're going to be that tight on time, so if someone needed to go over a little bit, that'd be okay. But that general format would be, I'll ask a question and folks will take 2 minutes. It's not intended to be a debate, not going back and forth between candidates. I'm simply going to ask a question and get the answer from each of the candidates. We have tonight participating Maureen Marshall and Troy Velarde, who are running for selectman. And we have Matthew Urban, who is running for the full seat on the planning board, which is a 5-year term. There are some other people running for, there's another person running for that full seat who chose not to participate, named Anthony Mobilio. And another gentleman named Frank LaRange, who's running for a 1-year term associate seat on the planning board, who also chose not to participate. I've been informed that there is a new write-in candidate for the one-year associate seat named John Harpin. So if John shows up here and wants to participate, he should raise his hand and we'll treat him like any of the other candidates. But to get started, I'm going to just ask a pretty general question. And I'm going to try and just be fair by kind of jumping around and doing the order a bit randomly. So let's start with Mr. Urban. Could you please introduce yourself? Tell us what you're running for and why did you decide to run for this seat?
Yeah, so my name is Matt Urban. Running for the planning board 5-year position. I had been on the select board for approximately the last 5.5 years. My term ends this April during the election. I really want to continue to serve the town. I see that the town and the planning board is pursuing things like the master plan. They're working on NRPZ, which is a natural resource protection zoning bylaw. I think these are some very important things that the town are coming across. And I think I can provide a perspective that will help the town. It's a 5-member board, so that is what it is. I'm a 20% part of the vote, but I believe that my experience with the select board, working with various departments, working with various other boards, I have a good idea of how they all interconnect, which I think helps when working on a master plan and trying to figure out how the details of a master plan affects each different part of the town. So it is something that I find exciting, and I really want to get involved with the town and see what they want and kind of work towards a common goal and see what we can do to plan how the town's going to grow into the future. And so I felt that moving from the select board to the planning board was going to be a good role for that. And I hope the town agrees.
Thank you. Let's go to Mr. Velarde. Same question. Please introduce yourself. Tell us what you're running for and why did you decide to run for this seat?
My name is Troy Velarde and I'm running for select board. I'm running for select board because I want to serve the community. A number of years ago, I was on the planning board. I want to see what I can do to help the town grow, see what we can do to get businesses back here and try to help the residents in their needs and what they want from the town and what they expect.
All right. And Ms. Marshall.
I'm running for the position, the open position on the Board of Selectmen. And I would like first to thank the Democratic Town Committee for sponsoring this event and you as moderator for agreeing to sort of, I don't know, be sure that we're all doing the right thing at the right time. And the reason that I have decided to run for the Board of Selectmen is something that is not a new thing for me. I can tell you that for at least a decade or two, as superintendent of schools, people would say to me, what are you going to do after you retire? And I would say to them, I'm going to run for selectman. And I guess after I've been retired now from the Quabbin Regional School District for 3 years, and when this position became available, I thought quite a long time about it, but I said, this is probably the time. It's the time because I bring a skill set that I believe will be helpful, in that I have worked in a governmental agency for a number of decades. I understand public finance. I understand how to access money from the Commonwealth. I understand how to meet with legislators and lobby for positions that would be necessary for our town. I know how to write grants, I know how to manage grants, and I know how to execute a plan. So that being said, I look at for this as the opportunity to serve the community in a different capacity. I know that there are many out there who say, you know, she will just give all the money to the town. I mean, to the schools. I would tell you that I bring to this position, not that as a focus or as a goal, but as a goal to bring what I have learned, to bring the support that I've always demonstrated for schools to all parts of the town, to bring the energy, the enthusiasm, and the commitment that I had for the schools to everything in town. Since nominated, kind of thinking that I would seek this position, I have spent time meeting with the fire department, with the DPW, the Veterans Administration, some groups in the town, especially in the South Barre area, who are currently feeling a little disenfranchised. I've met also with parent groups to find out what's going on, what do people need, what's happening with our finances in the town, what's the burdens that they wish we could lift from their backs. And of course, people talk about tax rates and tax bills, and I have certainly done quite a bit of research on where we are with tax rates and tax bills in Barre, and I think I understand that. The thing that I am so committed to is the idea that our community has the possibility to be even better than it currently is. And to be better than it currently is, we have to know what better looks like. And we have to begin to define what our actual goals are. And obviously, working with Mr. Urban and the planning board would be a critical part of that, because we don't know where we're going. We just put out fires and hope it all works out in the end. So I look at this as an opportunity to serve in a capacity that is different, but similar to what I've done in the past, and to, I hope, provide a skill set that would be helpful. So I guess that's what I choose and hope to do.
Thank you. Mr. Velarde, can you identify for us one thing on your resume that you think most uniquely qualifies you for this office?
One thing that uniquely, not really sure. I've been a resident here all my life. I want to try to get businesses back in town is something I'm looking to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I spent some time on the planning board. I spent 10 years on the Barre Fire Department. So I've served the town in the past a little bit, and I'd like to do it again.
Yeah. Okay. Mr. Urban, what's one thing on your resume that you think uniquely qualifies you for the office of planning board?
I do believe the last 5.5 years on the select board does help, and it's important because it's allowed me to get to know kind of the current feel of the town on many subjects. It's also allowed me to understand how decisions by the planning board affect the rest of the town. When it comes to what I do for a living, and you want to speak of my resume, I'm a project manager. So my goal is to identify issues and find ways to resolve them. Also in that regard, I have to deal with contracts and work both sides. So there are times I've got to make sure we can accomplish a goal by reaching across the aisle in a way with the contractor, and find a way to get to a common goal where the contractor feels like it was a fair and reasonable decision, as well as I feel that way. So there's a balance when you're working with others, and my experience with project management and contract management, I think, is a big plus. You've got to understand there are going to be times where you come to the table and you're not on the same page of what you want, but you've got to find the common ground so that you can get to the end goal and have both parties walk away happy, or at least satisfied.
Thank you. Ms. Marshall, what's one thing on your resume that you think most uniquely qualifies you for this office?
My experience in public government, public service, serving currently on the Barre Library Association as its president, serving for 6 years on the Board of Health in the town of Barre, obviously working a number of decades as an administrator of a large municipal government department, and also my current position as the Executive Director for the Mass Association of Regional Schools, where I do lobbying activities and so forth at the state level on behalf of regional schools across the Commonwealth.
Okay, thank you. My next question is really a zoning question, but I think I'm going to ask all three of you the question because I think it'll give us a feel for how you see the role of government working within the town. Let's start with you, Ms. Marshall. Many towns have zoning bylaws that require business signs to fit in with the aesthetics of the business zone. You can think about a lot of the towns around here. You go through the business zone, all the signs kind of look the same. That's not the case in Barre's Common. Should Barre have a sign appearance bylaw like those towns have?
That is something that I would have to contemplate, and I certainly would seek to garner more public opinion on what people think about that. I am certainly, I find it difficult to have some of the signs that look like I may have made them when I was a third grader, thrown around the town for, you know, advertising particular business or a particular, quite frankly, you know, pop-up business. I find that a little distasteful, and I think that that there should be a sign bylaw. I don't know if they should all be the same, but I think they should all be aesthetically pleasing.
Mr. Urban.
I believe it's something that we should have on the table when we're discussing our future growth. Partly because I do believe there's a faction of town that truly agrees with the idea that we should have some type of sign standard, possibly based with either overlay districts or other things, so we can identify specific commons should have certain rules where other areas may not be as important. So I think it's something we have to consider. I see the benefit. I love how the town, I kind of love how the town looks, understanding that, yes, we do have some pieces that don't seem to fit a certain area. But I also don't feel like, I guess the best way to put it is, I think we have to understand that the concept of, you know, an owner having a decision forced upon them that may affect their financial ability to do what they're looking to do as a business can affect our potential economic growth. And so I think we got to be careful at how far we go with that. But I do think in certain areas we could benefit with some type of standard that as we continue to grow, we know that we're growing in a certain direction that will maintain a prettier common. For example, you know, we recently lost Picasso's restaurant on the common. The next person that comes in, we have no clue what they're going to do there. And that could either be a positive, or it could be something where people look at it and say, you know what? That doesn't match what people envision our common being in the future. And without a voice in that, such as a bylaw regarding business signage or similar, you're really not going to have a say. The owner is going to say, this is what I want, this is what I can do, and this is what you get. And so I think it's something we definitely need to discuss. I see value in it. But I wouldn't make it the thing that has to happen if we have to figure out other ways to continue to work with our town and find ways for different parties to help with the economic development, but also help with proper residential growth and how we're looking at potentially with the master plan. We may also talk about revising the zoning map, and how you do that could really impact other parts of town that you're not thinking about if you don't have certain bylaws in place that could affect the signage that you'll see along the road.
It's been a while since I asked the question, so I'll repeat it, Mr. Velarde. Do you think that Barre should have a sign appearance bylaw like some of the surrounding towns have?
We should have one, but if we're gonna have one, I think it shouldn't be just for the common. It shouldn't be just for uptown. It should be set for everybody. But then again, it should also be up to debate that it should be not just spoke about at certain meetings. It should be brought up to the town on what they would believe in. I don't think that it should be just set where it's, well, we're just going to do it for this area of town. I think it should be set for everybody if we're going to get into that. I understand that there are some signs out there people don't like, and then there's other ones. I don't want to see where we're going to get into something where it's going to have to be a sign that we're going to put up that it's going to be only these colors though. You gotta have somewhere where people have their businesses that they want to promote what their business is about as well. But I also agree, you just can't have all different types and different size signs out there. So that there should be a little bit of a control on how they are and what they look like. But like I said, once again, I don't agree that it should only be with certain parts of town. If we're gonna have something, it should cover the whole town.
Hey, thank you. Let's start with you, Mr. Velarde, with the next question. This is kind of a broad one, but what's your vision for the future of Barre?
Well, my vision is I'd like to be able to get a more, I'd like to see more businesses come to town. I think that we need some more businesses in this town to help out with the tax base here. We don't have a lot of businesses here anymore. I'm also looking to see what we can do to talk to the residents and see what they want done here and what they would expect to be done. But I honestly believe that right now what we need to do is to get more businesses and back to the city here. Excuse me, back to the town. We've lost an awful lot lately. That's what my vision is right now, is trying to get businesses back here.
Thank you. Ms. Marshall, what is your vision for the future of Barre?
Well, I'm not going to stretch it out and tell you what should be here 10 years from now, but I would be very concerned and about the future in the next 2 to 3 years. Because as we emerge from the pandemic, we figured some things out. We figured out that broadband and if you don't have broadband, you certainly can't attract businesses, broadband for everyone. You can't attract economic development in our community. You can't really hope for work-at-home families to be able to do their jobs when broadband is not available to them. So I know that is for a future of 2 to 3 years that needs to be addressed. Another thing for the future is to understand that we will be having our hands on, if you might want to put it that way, a considerable amount of COVID relief money that will be coming into the community. It'll be coming to schools, it'll be coming to the community. Some of it will be restricted in use, but much of it may not be. We know that the governor has the capacity to decide how much money individual towns will get. We need to be on top of, obviously, ensuring that Barre gets its share. In addition to that, that money needs to be spent by December 2024. That gives our towns access to some monies that we normally would not see or have as a partner in our work to decide what the future of Barre would look like. And so I think that my idea of the future is being able to be strategic economically in a manner that has never been our opportunity, because we've never had this amount of money that will roll into our community. Being able to decide, probably merged with our master plan work, about how that money should be allocated and how that will help our citizens garner hopefully more, I guess, resources so that they can work from home if necessary, they can be entrepreneurial if necessary. But this is an opportunity for our short-term future to be pretty powerful if we're smart, if we understand our need to exercise our what lobbying capacity we may have at the legislative level and certainly in Boston. But it also could set us, give us a leg up after what has been a pretty tough time. If we look right now, I don't think our free cash is even certified yet. I think we may be in the midst of an audit or something that's holding that up. So what our next year budget is going to look like is futuristic enough for me to think that that could become somewhat of a struggle. But as we have new monies available to us, we have to be strategic and careful and create a foundation, an economic foundation that allows us to move forward by attracting businesses, by being a place where people want to come for a business that might be located here. So I guess I look at a very short-term future right now because we have so much to do since sort of emerging from the, I hope we continue to emerge from the pandemic. We still sit at about a 9% unemployment rate here, where prior to the pandemic, we were about a 5% unemployment rate. So that's of concern to me. Part of that, my future for the town would be to try to assist, if necessary, and if possible, people in, getting the employment that they deserve and that would be certainly beneficial to their families and the community. So I look at a short-term future as we position ourselves to sort of have a springboard.
Thank you. Mr. Urban, what is your vision for the future of Barre?
I see Barre, in general, to start with, I see Barre growing into, continuing to be a main center of regionalization. We are kind of the center of the school district. Right now, we're the center of a regional building commissioner agreement that has 3 other towns involved, so a total of 4 towns. We have an agreement with New Braintree to provide them their ambulance and EMS service. We're looking at other opportunities to continue that. I think that of the 5 towns in the school district, and then also including Peterson, we have many good partners. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to leave Rutland out. We do have, I gotta recall, we had an agreement with them for IT services. I don't recall if it's still standing. Some things had changed with the contract work that was going on. But the point I'm trying to get at is I see us still growing as a center for regionalization, where many of those things, the main point will be housed within Barre, and Barre will be the primary direction on how those agreements will move forward, but they're also partnership with the other towns. I believe the reason Barre works well like that is because we've always considered it a partnership and not we just need someone to help pay us so that we can do what we want to do anyway. I think it's very important to understand the partnership with your local communities. On an economic side, I've been striving since I was on the select board to continue to look for different economic development, whether it's various different industries. I had talked about hemp for a while. Obviously, I was in support of certain marijuana facilities because I understood that the financial impact to the town was going to be significant compared to our other revenue sources we can get from other business development. But I also understood that we've got to balance that. There's other things that people think about marijuana, so that wasn't going to be the direction that we were going to build a huge financial empire on. But I believe that that's really the goal. In a way, I kind of mimic a little bit of what Troy and Maureen were bringing up. In order for Barre to really move forward in the future and work on the other things that they want, like new housing, new residential development, so people are moving into new homes, not trying to find a 250-year-old home and figure out how to make it work. And by the time they give up, they move on to another town. Or I believe if you drive through town, we have a lot of good people, we have a lot of good businesses, but if you drive through, you'll also notice a lot of them are running down. They're able to maintain the business, but they're having a hard time kind of keeping the storefront up, keeping other things up, so that we've had some great upgrades, like down at the Wholesome Farmers Market and the frontage on the property that's owned there. They've done a great job cleaning that up. And that's not a knock on anybody. I'm just saying the economic situation makes it hard for them to do it. I don't think anybody would just say, I don't care. They're just trying to balance their budget and figure out how to do it. And I would like to be able to set the town up in a way where people feel like I found a way to do this. And some of that comes with finding the economic development that increases revenue, chasing grants to reduce other expenses in our annual operating budget so that we can start working on reducing tax rates. It's one of the focuses that I plan to bring up at my last Board of Selectmen meeting is to start working with the Finance Committee so that instead of looking at, we can just increase our budget up 2% because that's what the state allows, we start looking at how we budget so we can, on how it's going to affect the tax rate, not necessarily just because we have a capacity available. I know that's very difficult because how's somebody going to get a raise if you don't increase the budget? Well, it kind of changes if you get alternate revenues that aren't just based on property tax. And so we've got to find those other alternate revenue sources, and that's where I'm coming from. So I think that I see us growing, but we're going to have to do it in multiple facets, not just economic, but also residential.
Okay, thank you. It appears that we lost Troy. He was mobile, so that's not terribly surprising. Giving him an opportunity to come back, I'm going to ask a question that's really just for Mr. Urban. Often, I mean, one of the roles of the planning board is to propose new zoning bylaws. And in zoning, there's a balance between the community interests and private property rights. In considering our changes to the zoning bylaws, which of those do you think carries more weight?
You're asking what carries more weight, the general interests of the population versus the individual owner?
Yep.
Okay. I don't think it's consistent depending on the topic. So I do think that it depends on what you're speaking about. But for me, I'm more inclined as an owner's rights. And it's not necessarily because I don't agree with the general population's opinions and their desires for how they want it to go. No matter what comes before me, I'm not going to just take that opinion of I like owner's rights and guide that right through to the end. It's just that I'm going to use that mentality to really pay attention to what rights are we giving to the community. And because it's a zoning bylaw, the de facto planning board that represents the community at that time, because once the bylaw is approved, it pretty much is just down to the planning board or the building commissioner, depending on the type of zoning bylaw, to enforce or follow through if there's any subjective criteria involved in a special permit. I believe you've got to be careful with any power you give to a government entity. And the reason is, a lot of times you base it on who's in office today and whether you like them or not. And in this year or the next year, all of a sudden you can start turning around the people that in that board, and all of a sudden the power you gave them is being used in a way you didn't expect. So that's where I really try to pay attention to what I don't want to call it the loopholes, but the nuance of a zoning bylaw and how is it really going to play out over time. And so similar to how I've stated before in some things where, does the state want to add more conservation in the land? And I'm in the town, or take on more land. And I am full proponent of conservation, but I don't trust the state to let us continue to use the land after they take it. And so there's a balance. So I would be like, no, don't give it to the state, but we should still pay attention and create policies locally that tell us how we're going to use that land. So there's a balance. And so I don't agree that it's necessarily all owners' rights, but I think individually, everybody in this town should be careful on the rights you're willing to give up, because one day that may be a right that you wish you still had.
Thank you. I have a question that's just for Ms. Marshall. You referred to it, made a reference to this at the beginning, but I kind of give you a chance to really talk about it. You have a long relationship with the school district here. How do you see that influencing, in particular, the budget negotiations that go back and forth between the town and the school committee?
Well, most of the negotiations between the town and the school committee is between the school committee and the budget and finance committee. Is once in a while, at least from my perspective, we met with the Board of Selectmen, or the Board of Selectmen may have come to a public hearing at the district level, whatever. But most of the back and forth and finalizing figures and finally getting to town meeting with a number was primarily with the finance committee. As a member of the Board of Selectmen, obviously, I would have those opportunities where there would be that meeting back and forth. But ultimately, the budget and finance committees would work with the school committee. The school committee is a duly elected body, and it has the power and authority to create the budget and to calculate the assessment and to bring that assessment to town meeting floor. The Board of Selectmen does not have the ability or power or whatever to vote the assessment. It is the community, the town meeting, that votes that assessment. So as a one member of the Board of Selectmen, I would suspect I would have very little influence. I have a vote, one vote, and that would be whether I would ultimately, I don't know if the selectmen ultimately sat around and said that they were going to recommend the school budget or not. They may have, I don't know. It was not their recommendation that we generally sought. We sought the Budget and Finance Committee's recommendation. So the selectmen never, at least overtly, played an active anti or positive role with the school budget, at least in my tenure. So I would expect that would continue. And the opportunity for any selectman would be, as it has been in the past, to speak regarding the budget that the school committee would present. But the school committee has the statutory authority to present the budget and to present the assessment as they've calculated. And even if the Budget and Finance Committee doesn't like it, or the selectmen don't like it, the school committee has that authority. I would have no capacity to mitigate that authority, nor to enhance it. So I don't think it is as a big a concern as some people will think it is. Because in the end, the school committee will present a budget or the assessment on the floor, and the hands either go in the air or they don't.
Okay.
I've been there when the selectmen's hands and the budget and finance hands were all in the air. I've been there when none of those hands were in the air and the public still voted the budget, or the public did not vote that budget and we had to go back to the drawing board. I don't expect that will change, because my position, I will have far less authority and influence, if I even wanted it, to manipulate the school budget as one select board member. So I know that is a concern. I fully imagine that that's still a concern for people, because they have this belief that somehow I can, do some magic with the Budget and Finance Committee, the rest of the Board of Selectmen, and all of a sudden everybody's spending more money on schools. I wish that maybe were true some years ago. It is not true. I cannot make it true. And I understand completely that I have one vote at that town meeting, whether I choose to vote for the school budget or not. That is one vote as a citizen.
Thank you. Let's stick with you for my next question. You mentioned this before in one of your earlier answers. Do you believe that the town taxpayers should cover all or part of the cost of extending the cable lines on roads that do not currently have cable service?
I do not believe that it is probably feasible for many people who live in various parts of the town that do not have service currently. They would have the economic capacity to, to pay for this extension themselves. I believe that there should be some there is some state money coming along. There is some COVID relief money coming along that is specifically, allocated for broadband expansion. There is probably nobody who whines and complains more at the state level to senators and representatives, which I spent probably 3 hours with on the phone and in a Zoom meeting last Thursday about broadband expansion for rural Massachusetts. They have done a very poor job in getting the project completed because they do have, they have the same desire that we do. There's conversations that this should be a public utility. That's certainly nothing that the town of Barre can make happen, but certainly that's something the state can have happen. And if it were a public utility, that would put more burden on a public utility, or also more opportunity for the legislature and or even with federal money to expand broadband. So I have hope that broadband will not end up being on the back of an individual taxpayer in Row, Massachusetts, or Barre, Massachusetts, or wherever else broadband is still sparse. So my hope is that if I were selected or been, if I'm lucky enough to get the position as select board member, I certainly will work not to burden the individual taxpayer, but to look to the state and any COVID relief money that comes that may indeed be restricted for the use of broadband, that we use that in the best possible way to make sure we get as many folks in Barre who do not have access at this point, that they would end up having access once we got through that. I think there's going to be more opportunity than in broadband expansion than we've had in the past. So I know I do not think I think that the town and the state and the feds have an obligation, and I think they should make them a public utility, but that's what I think, and that's, again, one vote.
Okay. All right. Let's see.
It's you and me, Matt.
Yeah, I ran into this question. I had a whole bunch of questions, right? But then as things evolved and we had only one person who's running for the planning board, I don't really want to, lean into all of those things. And now we only have one person left who's running for selectman. So I have kind of the same thing happening again. Let's see, how about, well, yeah, let's bite into the fun one. Guess it's been a bit of an issue on Facebook last couple of weeks.
Oh, great.
Rumor has it that there might be a gun shop coming to Barre. I don't really want to address whether the rumor is true or not, but I do want to ask, I'll start with Mr. Urban. What's your opinion about whether a gun shop coming to Barre would be a good thing or a bad thing or not a thing?
I truly believe it's not a thing. And the reason I believe that is you still have to be a certain age to buy a gun. Nobody's sneaking in to grab a gun and run. It's a highly, I know people don't think this, but it's actually, once you're a gun shop and not running around from flea market to flea market, it's a highly regulated place. Mm-hmm. And people are just going a couple towns over to get guns anytime they want. So it comes back to economic development. I see, if you get a gun shop in here, you're causing people to buy from a local business versus another one. I don't think having a gun shop is going to change the personality of this town. I did see the poll on Facebook. I do understand that poll is not something I would count a lot on because it couldn't come through anonymously, and there's a lot of reasons for that. I do think there's a fair share of the community that would be afraid of a gun shop. They're not comfortable with guns as it is. I also think there's a good portion of the community that were raised with guns. They understand guns. They understand respectful use of guns and proper use of guns. And so they haven't developed any fear so much of guns as just a healthy respect and understanding what they can do and the right way to handle them so that they don't become something that is a danger more than the tool that they were intended to be. So ultimately, my answer is, I don't think it's a big deal. I think it's another business, and if we can get another business in town, it's going to be beneficial to the town.
Thank you. Ms. Marshall, same question.
I don't think that I'm a far afield of Matt on this one. I think that Massachusetts is one of those highly regulated states relative to gun purchasing, background checks, and all of the things that Washington would hopefully begin to discuss soon. So the fact that the statute in Massachusetts does not prohibit a gun store, it prohibits a lot of stuff that the gun store owner can't do, that I think we're pretty much in line with in Massachusetts. It's very restricted. And I would suspect that they have the statutory and right to do this. And it would be very difficult to just say that makes me uncomfortable. There are probably more guns in homes in Barre than many of us have the capacity to count. And certainly, hopefully, most of them are registered as they're supposed to be registered. They're stored the way they're supposed to be stored. I know that the Sportsman Club in Barre provides, or used to provide, the what is it, the educational component that allows you to be a gun owner. They used to do that. So I'm guessing that that is still done in the community. There's shoots and so forth that they have sometimes at sportsmen's clubs in town that people in town participate in, and people from out of town come in and participate. I would, perhaps I'd prefer a nail salon, but that's not necessarily any better for the town. And I think it is a business that has the right to exist and that will follow all of the regulations. And if it doesn't, then it becomes a problem for perhaps the selectmen, but most appropriately, probably the police.
All right. Where's my question here? Past few years, we've witnessed an unprecedented, in my experience, level of animosity between the planning board and the Board of Selectmen.
Okay.
So, Ms. Marshall, we'll start with you. Do you see this dynamic as a problem? And if so, how do you plan to address it?
Of course, it would be a problem. I mean, if our boards that are, hopefully working toward the benefits of the town have strained or difficult relationships that don't allow either board to be effective, that's a problem. Contrary to probably some, public conversation, I tend to be quite a collaborator and believe that there are different ideas. Certainly groupthink doesn't work, but different ideas and the ability to have conversations about them and to still move forward to the benefit of the town is our obligation. To bring personal nonsense into that would certainly not be appropriate. And I certainly would not contribute to that and would try in every way possible to say, okay, can we calm down because we've got to fix this issue and we've got to come to some agreement. Because ultimately something has to happen and the town has to have a bylaw or something completed. So I would suspect that it might be some difficult conversations, but difficult conversations ultimately usually produce a better product.
Thank you. Mr. Urban, do you see the dynamic as a problem and how do you plan to address it?
I was part of that problem. Especially assuming, or if the town is willing and I get voted in, and if I become part of the planning board, I recognize that going into a board that at least 4 of the members will be members that I had been working with over the last year on the other side as a Board of Selectmen member. And I recognize there's some lingering feelings about some very heavy discussions we had regarding some zoning bylaws that went before the town. And I guess right now, the first thing I would say is I respect everybody on that planning board. They may not realize it. Maybe I haven't been vocal enough in expressing that, but I believe that everyone is passionate. Everybody believes in what they're doing, and they're trying to do their best to represent the town the best they know how. So I give them a lot of credit for that. And they may not believe it when I say it, but I truly do believe it. But when I'm in the middle of a debate or something, I generally kind of really just stick to the nuts and bolts, and I'm working, you recommend this, but I see this is where an issue is, and I express my side of it, and sometimes we just end up butting heads. It's whether it's both sides not seeing each other accurately, or we just aren't going to agree. Ultimately, when I was on the Board of Selectmen, all I had was a voice. I might as well have been a citizen. You know, I'm just kind of providing my comments, and the planning board's going to do what they're going to do. And they did. And I respected that. Right to the end on town meeting floor, I would state my opinion, but once the vote was made, it was made. And you move on. And I think that there's a part of that where I think people sometimes have a difficult time understanding that it's okay to have a really hard discussion, not to agree, and walk away and not make it personal. And I don't think people realize that I don't take it personal. And because of that, I don't realize sometimes other people might be. And that's a personality thing I'm trying to work on. I don't realize maybe that someone else doesn't necessarily agree. You can have a really harsh discussion, not agree. I never name called. I don't have any issues with that. That's not who I am. But if I have an opinion, I think people have learned that I'm not afraid to speak up and hold my ground on what I believe is right. But once a decision's made, you got to walk away and move forward. And so my hope here is to rebuild a relationship. Obviously, if I'm going to be on the planning board, it's not so much a planning board, Board of Selectmen, but as a member of the planning board, I definitely would listen to the selectmen's input. I believe a good selectman or woman, a member of the select board, would be connecting with their constituents. So I don't think they're always speaking just on their own opinion. They're speaking with the people they've talked to. And that's what I did. I didn't go into things and hold my ground without talking to other people and knowing that there is a certain level of support in my position. But moving forward, if I'm on the planning board, yeah, let's have a discussion. If we don't agree, we don't agree, but I'm going to try to do better at letting them know I appreciate the effort and I appreciate their position, so that maybe the way I approach it would be build less animosity, because that's not ever what my intent was.
Okay. I think this may be my last question. This is just for Mr. Urban. The planning board does not have a history during this during the pandemic and even before of broadcasting their meetings on cable and YouTube the way that, say, the Board of Selectmen meetings. Is that something that you should they? And if so, is there, do you have plans for that?
Personally, I believe they should have the same access that the Board of Selectmen gives to the town. So I agree that yes, it should be videoed. I would recommend that the meetings are moved into the Selectmen's meeting room, so it can be videoed, broadcast, and recorded and available to the general public in the same manner. I think the planning board's actions for the town are just as important as the Board of Selectmen's. And knowing who you vote for, how they act, what decisions they make, I think is important to the community, and they should know how people are representing the various interests in town at a meeting. So by the time they actually see a bylaw, which a lot of times, most of the community, the best they get is an agenda, because they don't have time to go to a meeting on a Tuesday night at 7 o'clock for whatever reason. And so they get to see a bylaw pretty much when they walk in the door at town meeting. And then they're asked to make a vote on it. And I do believe that the process of getting to how that bylaw was written would be very important if people had the ability to go back and, or even as it's going, watch, listen, pay attention, and see what's going on and why it's going in that direction. So to me, I think it's extremely important to be transparent in that process. So I'm going to start with seeing if I can get the planning board to kind of agree with that concept. From the Board of Selectmen, when I approached them, they weren't very interested. But if that doesn't happen, I'm still willing to work with others to see if the town really wants a bylaw that mandates it. Because I believe it's that important to the town. I think we have probably 4 or 5 key boards that their meetings should be recorded and people could watch them, whether it's the Board of Health, the Planning Board, the Board of Selectmen, the DPW Commission. These all play very significant roles in town, and in the extremely fast world we live in today, people can't make those meetings when they're scheduled. So to record it and give them the opportunity to see it later, I think is extremely important, and continues to encourage the town to participate in their own town. You don't see the meetings, you don't understand how meetings go, you don't want to be a selectman, you don't want to be a planning board member, you don't even want to get on a subcommittee to do an open space and recreation plan because we need people to be on it. I think having more meetings available encourages more people to participate.
Okay. Ms. Marshall, do you have any final words for the collection of
do.
voters we have here?
I do. Primarily, I've some little insight from that for me anyway, as I began to visit the highway department, and I visited the fire department, spent some good deal of time in both places, understanding better what they do, how they do it, what needs they have, what things that they feel that they've really accomplished, talking to water commissioners and DPW about sewer enterprise funds and how things are going to be paid for, and how healthy those enterprise funds are as our parts of our infrastructure age, to talk also with a group of South Barre residents who feel very disenfranchised in our community, to walk with them to the playground, and for them to point out to me, see this, how come our playground looks like this? How come there are broken things on our playground? And it was eye-opening for me to say, who knew? Eye-opening to me to find out how many ambulance runs happen in a year, and what our emergency response team does, to talk to Mike Koval and to see that perspective and to understand that. Because I know schools, and I get it, it's 60-70% of your budget some years. I know schools, but I know better now. There are 350 veterans in the town of Barre. I was stunned with that number as I talked with the veterans agent and talked about what he does and how many people are in serious and right now in desperate need of help and assistance, and what the veterans agent does and so forth. So I would say that if the vote doesn't go my way, I will tell you that I know more about Barre now than I have ever known about Barre, and I have lived here most of my life for sure. I also thank the Democratic Town Committee again for putting this little, shall we say, I don't know if it's just this little show between you and me, but together, because I think it's really helpful. It brings transparency. I doubt that there's a huge crowd out there listening to you and me, Matt, but maybe. And I look forward to continuing to kind of have conversations with people about Barre and what they see and how they see it. Because certainly my vision of Barre and my expectations for what we can do in a very short 3-year term, I really need that input. And I look forward to the opportunity to get that input, and also look forward to helping Troy if he's the lucky guy, and to also working with the planning board if I'm a selectman or if I'm just an active citizen who can lend a hand. But I thank everyone for taking the time this evening. Josh, I thank you for doing this. I'm sure you had some other things that might have been a little more interesting, maybe not. But anyway, thanks again. And I hope everybody votes on April 5th for whomever they think can do the best job.
Thank you. Mr. Urban, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I would start also with a large thank you to the Barre Democratic Committee for organizing this, working with many people to try to make this work. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, for moderating this as well as you've done with all the annual town meetings and other things that you participated in. I appreciate it. You're always very respectful, and you continue to do so. Thank you, Senator Brewer, for taking the time to do an introduction. To me, it's very important when you see people that have dedicated their life for so long to helping the general population. I mean, he's done it when it started at a town, and he's worked his way up to cover the entire state. He's committed his life to trying to find ways to help others, and it's a good role model, I think, for many people to understand. Despite the fact he may actually not always agree with someone, I've never walked away from Senator Brewer and not felt better. He just has a way. And so to me, that reminded me kind of like what we were talking about earlier about Board of Selectmen, planning board relationships. It's not a personal thing. You're just working to an end. And as long as you recognize the other people are trying just as hard as you to do what they think is right for the town, you're going to go in the right direction. You keep working it, but it's not a personal issue. And we got a lot of things to go through here as a town. We've got a lot of things to build on, to grow on, work with, whether it is zoning bylaws or whether it is economic development pursuits, working on grants and the extension of the broadband. We got a lot before us, and it's going to be critical we work together or we won't get any of it done. So to me, it's remembering it's never an individual that makes something happen. So an individual can talk, speak, maybe encourage others to get involved, but those individuals still got to get involved. And until they do, it's going to be a team. So we got to know that, and we got to know how to develop the team, work the team, and help the team get where we want to go. And for me, representing the town of Barre, that team is the town of Barre. It's not the planning board. It's not the Board of Selectmen. We are generally servants playing a role. And if we're not in touch with the people of town, we're not doing our job. And so we've got to encourage the town participation, work with them, ask questions, and get answers, and try to move forward in a common direction.
All right. Thank you both. I asked Ellen to give me a little bit of information about the election. I can tell you what she said. She said the polls are going to be open on Monday, April 5th from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. That all requests for mail-in ballots, early or absentee, need to be received by the town clerk by Tuesday, March 30th by 5 p.m. All ballots all ballots must be received by the town clerk before the polls close at 8 p.m. on April 5th. There's a large blue drop mailbox located outside the Henry Woods building for next to the staircase. It's available 24/7 if voters want to drop off their ballots or their applications to receive a ballot. She says voters should be sure to return their census forms to avoid their voter registration status being inactivated. So that seems important. And a reminder to the two of you that there is a campaign finance filing deadline on March 29th. And you can follow up with her on what you need to do to tell her how much money you spent and that sort of thing. So if anybody has any questions about that, Ellen answers her email at all hours of the day and night, clerk@townofbarre.com. I just today asked her how I get my mail-in ballot because I don't want to go to the polls again not till the pandemic's over personally. So thank you both. Thank you to the Town Democratic Committee for putting this whole thing together. And thank you to the 40 people who showed up to listen. I think that's just a fantastic number. I'm really impressed and I'm happy about that. And I don't know, maybe we'll do this again next year. Thank you.